This is the story of Kojo and Ama, a couple who thought their wedding day would be the happiest day of their lives. But little did they know, a secret from Kojo's past was about to shatter their perfect day. Meet Afi, the mysterious woman who crashes the wedding with a shocking revelation that will turn everything upside down. Will love survive the betrayal? Will Kojo and Ama find a way to rebuild their lives after the truth comes out? If today is your first time, then take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. In the bustling city of Accra, nestled within the vibrant and close-knit community of Asanka, the wedding of the year was about to take place. The entire town was abuzz with anticipation, and every conversation seemed to circle back to the much-anticipated union of Kojo Mensah and Ama Owusu. Kojo, a young and successful businessman, had captured the hearts of many with his charm, ambition, and undeniable generosity. He was known as a man who worked hard for everything he had achieved, rising from humble beginnings to owning one of the most successful import-export businesses in the country. Ama, on the other hand, was the epitome of grace and beauty. Raised by her grandmother in a traditional home, she had been taught values of kindness, loyalty, and resilience. Ama worked as a nurse in one of the city's largest hospitals, where she was beloved by both her colleagues and patients. Her gentle spirit and selfless dedication to caring for others made her the perfect partner for Kojo, and together, they seemed like a match made in heaven. Their love story had inspired many, as they had been together for nearly 5 years. It was a relationship built on mutual respect, support, and a deep, unwavering love that had survived the test of time and distance. Kojo had been away on business trips numerous times, but Ama had always been there, waiting patiently and understanding the nature of his work. The community viewed their love as something pure and unbreakable, the kind of relationship every young couple aspired to emulate. The traditional wedding ceremony, set to take place on a warm Saturday afternoon, was grand. The streets of Asanka were decorated with colorful Kent cloth, and the air was filled with the rhythmic beats of talking drums and the sweet melodies of traditional songs. The village square, where the ceremony would be held, had been transformed into a scene straight out of a dream. Chairs were arranged in neat rows, covered in white fabric with golden bows, while bright red and yellow flowers adorned every corner. The smell of spices and freshly prepared food filled the air, a testament to the feast that would follow the ceremony. Friends and family traveled from far and wide to witness this grand union. Relatives from other regions of Ghana, and even from abroad, had arrived days before, filling Kojo and Ama's homes with laughter and excitement. In the hearts of the guests, this wedding symbolized not just the coming together of two individuals but also the merging of two families, two legacies, and two futures. Ama's family, led by her grandmother, Accra, a woman in her 70s, radiated with pride. Her parents had passed away when she was a child, leaving her in the care of her grandmother, who had raised her to be the strong, independent woman she was today. Accra had always known that her granddaughter was destined for greatness, and seeing her marry such a successful man only confirmed what she had always believed. Dressed in an elaborate Kent cloth, Accra walked with pride as she greeted guests, her cane tapping softly on the ground. Kojo's family, equally proud, was led by his father, Kofi Mensah, a retired government worker, and his mother, Esi, a trader. Kofi had always been a pillar of the community, known for his wisdom and integrity. Esi, on the other hand, was a lively woman, always quick with a smile and a laugh, and it was clear where Kojo had gotten his charm. The Mensah family had spared no expense in ensuring that the wedding was an event to remember. As the hour of the ceremony approached, Ama sat in a small room with her sisters and cousins, who were helping her get ready. She wore a stunning gown of intricately woven Kent, a blend of gold, orange, and purple, symbolizing royalty, wealth, and love. Her hair was braided in the traditional Ghanaian style, adorned with gold beads, and her skin gleamed with the light application of coconut oil. Ama's heart swelled with happiness as she thought about the journey that had brought her to this day. She had met Kojo 5 years ago at a mutual friend's engagement ceremony, and from the moment their eyes met, she knew he was the one. It hadn't been easy, especially with the demands of Kojo's work, but they had always found a way to make it work. As her sisters fussed over her appearance, ensuring every bead was in place, Ama couldn't help but smile at the joy that filled the room. Her younger sister, just 17, was already talking about how she would want her wedding to be just like Ama's when the time came. Her cousin, Afia, who had traveled all the way from Kumasi, teased Ama about how lucky she was to have found a man like Kojo. The air was filled with laughter, and Ama's heart was light. Yet, amid the joy, there was a subtle unease that Ama couldn't quite place. It was fleeting, like a shadow passing over her heart. She quickly brushed it aside, chalking it up to pre-wedding nerves. She had no reason to worry, everything was perfect. She had chosen the right man, the right dress, and the right day. This was going to be the beginning of a beautiful life. Outside, Kojo stood with his groomsmen, adjusting his traditional agbada and chatting with his friends. He looked every bit the groom, tall, handsome, and confident. The agbada, made from rich, navy blue fabric embroidered with gold patterns, was a testament to his status and success. His best man, Kwaku, teased him about how he wouldn't be able to go out with the boys as much once he was married. Kojo laughed, but there was a tightness in his chest, a weight he couldn't shake. He tried to tell himself that it was just the pressure of the day, the importance of the moment. But deep down, he knew that wasn't the whole truth. Kojo had a secret. A secret that, if exposed, would shatter the perfect image everyone had of him and his relationship with Ama. It was a secret that he had buried deeply, hoping that it would never see the light of day. But secrets have a way of surfacing at the most inopportune times, and Kojo feared that his past might come back to haunt him. As the officiant, an elder from the local church, arrived to start the ceremony, Kojo took a deep breath and tried to focus on the moment. This was his wedding day, and nothing was going to ruin it. He had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, and loved Ama too deeply to let anything get in the way of their happiness. The ceremony began with the traditional rites, as both families exchanged pleasantries and offered blessings to the couple. The sound of the drums filled the air, and the women sang songs of joy and praise. Kojo and Ama were called forward, and as they stood side by side, the crowd erupted into applause. They looked like the perfect couple, destined for a future filled with love, success, and happiness. As the elder began to speak, blessing their union and reminding them of the sacredness of marriage, Kojo's mind wandered for just a moment. He thought of Efi, a woman from his past. They had been together long before he met Ama, and while their relationship had ended, it had never fully resolved. Efi had been his first love, and though they had gone their separate ways, she had always believed that they would end up together. Kojo had tried to distance himself from her, but there was a part of him that had never fully let go. He shook the thoughts away, focusing back on the ceremony. This was about Ama, about their love, about their future. Efi was in the past, and that's where she would stay. Or so he hoped. As the vows were exchanged, and the rings slid onto their fingers, the crowd erupted into cheers. Kojo and Ama were pronounced husband and wife, and as they kissed, the world seemed to hold its breath. It was the perfect beginning to their new life together. But perfection is fragile, and the seeds of chaos had already been sown. As the wedding reception carried on into the evening, the community of Asanka reveled in the celebration. The air was thick with laughter, the sound of clinking glasses, and the vibrant rhythms of high-life music. Women in brightly colored Kent cloth danced joyously, their hips swaying to the beat of drums, while the men clapped and cheered. Tables were laden with traditional Ghanaian delicacies, jollof rice, fried plantains, grilled tilapia, and spicy goat soup. The sweet, smoky scent of roasted meats filled the air, mingling with the floral fragrance of freshly cut flowers that decorated the venue. Kojo and Ama, the center of it all, sat at a raised platform, smiling at their guests as they greeted the well-wishers who approached to offer gifts and blessings. Ama's face glowed with happiness, her smile radiant as she looked at the man she had just vowed to spend the rest of her life with. Kojo's hand rested protectively over hers, and he too smiled, but inside, a tempest brewed. Despite the grandeur and joy that surrounded him, Kojo could not shake the gnawing sense of unease. It started as a small, nagging thought, but as the hours passed, it grew into a weight that pressed down on his chest, threatening to suffocate him. His mind kept drifting back to Afi, the woman who had once held his heart before Ama had come into his life. Afi was more than just a fleeting lover from Kojo's past. She had been a constant presence in his life for years before he met Ama. Their relationship had been intense, passionate, and complicated. Afi was the kind of woman who commanded attention wherever she went. Her striking beauty and fierce personality were impossible to ignore, and Kojo had fallen for her hard when they first met. At the time, Kojo had been a struggling entrepreneur trying to find his footing in the business world. Afi had been there for him, encouraging him, pushing him to succeed, and providing emotional and financial support when times were tough. But as Kojo's fortunes began to rise, so did the tension in their relationship. Afi wanted more from him, a commitment, a promise of a future together. Kojo, however, wasn't ready for that kind of commitment. He was ambitious, focused on building his empire, and felt that settling down would slow him down. Over time, their relationship became strained, marked by arguments and disagreements. Eventually, Kojo ended things with Afi, telling her that he needed to focus on his career and wasn't ready for marriage. Afi had been devastated by the breakup, and though she tried to move on, she never fully accepted that it was over. She had always believed that Kojo would come back to her once he was ready to settle down. But Kojo had met Ama during that time, and everything changed. Ama was different, calm, nurturing, and supportive in a way that didn't feel demanding. With Ama, Kojo felt a sense of peace that he had never experienced with Afi. Over time, he fell deeply in love with Ama, and Afi faded into the background of his life. But now, as Kojo sat next to his new wife, surrounded by the laughter and joy of their friends and family, he couldn't help but feel a sense of impending doom. Afi had never fully let go, and Kojo knew that she was still somewhere out there, harboring feelings for him. He had heard through mutual friends that Afi was not happy about his engagement to Ama, and though she hadn't made any direct attempts to contact him, Kojo feared it was only a matter of time before she did. As the night wore on, Kojo's unease grew. He glanced around the reception, his eyes scanning the crowd as if expecting Afi to appear out of nowhere. His grip on Ama's hand tightened, and she turned to him, her brows knitting together in concern. "Are you okay, Kojo?" Ama asked softly, her voice barely audible over the music and chatter. Kojo forced a smile, nodding quickly. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just a little tired, I guess. It's been a long day." Ama smiled back, though her eyes still held a trace of worry. She could sense something was off, but she didn't push. Instead, she leaned over and kissed Kojo on the cheek. "Well, you've done a great job today. Everyone is so happy for us." Kojo nodded again, but inside, his thoughts were a whirlwind. He excused himself from the table, telling Ama he needed some air. As he stepped outside, the cool night breeze hit his face, offering a brief moment of relief from the tension that had been building all day. He walked toward the garden area of the venue, trying to clear his mind. As Kojo stood in the dimly lit garden, staring up at the starry sky, he pulled out his phone and opened his messages. There were congratulatory texts from friends and family, but none from Afi. That should have been a good sign, he thought. Maybe she had finally moved on. Maybe she had accepted that he was with Oma now and had chosen to let him go. But just as he was about to put his phone away, it buzzed in his hand. His heart skipped a beat as he looked down at the screen. A new message had come in from an unknown number. I heard the news. Congratulations on your marriage, Kojo. I hope you're happy with your decision. But don't think for a second that you can just forget about me. I'll be seeing you soon. Fi. Kojo's stomach dropped as he stared at the message, the blood draining from his face. The calm, serene night around him suddenly felt threatening, and the weight on his chest grew heavier. He knew Fi too well. She wasn't someone who made empty threats. If she said she was going to show up, she meant it. Panicked, Kojo quickly typed a response. Fi, please. Don't do this. It's over between us. I'm married now, and I love Oma. Let's move on. A few moments passed before her response came through. You think it's that easy, Kojo? After everything we've been through? After all the promises you made to me? You think you can just walk away and pretend like I don't exist? I won't be ignored. Kojo's hands shook as he read the message. He knew he needed to handle this delicately. The last thing he wanted was for Fi to cause a scene and ruin what was supposed to be the happiest day of his life. Fi, I never meant to hurt you. I'm sorry for how things ended, but it's been years. We've both moved on with our lives. Please, don't come here and cause trouble. I'm begging you. This time, there was no immediate response. Kojo stood there, phone in hand, waiting, his heart pounding in his chest. After what felt like an eternity, his phone buzzed again. We'll see about that. Enjoy your night, Kojo. Kojo's blood ran cold. He knew that tone all too well. Fi wasn't done. She was planning something, and he had no idea what it was or when it would happen. But one thing was certain, she wasn't going to let him walk away from their past without a fight. As Kojo stood in the darkness, staring at his phone, the perfect wedding day that had begun so beautifully was now clouded by a looming storm. He had no idea when Fi would strike, but he knew one thing: his past was about to collide with his present, and the consequences could be catastrophic. Kojo tucked his phone back into his pocket and took a deep breath. He had to keep calm. He couldn't let Oma or anyone else see his fear. Not tonight. But deep down, he knew the storm was coming, and there was no way to stop it. The night continued, but Kojo's mind was elsewhere. Every smile felt forced, every laugh hollow. He danced with Oma, held her close, and tried to focus on the love they shared, but the shadow of Fi loomed large in his thoughts. He knew that his perfect beginning was teetering on the edge of disaster, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The days following the wedding should have been blissful for Kojo and Oma, a time to relish their newlywed status and bask in the love and attention of family and friends. Instead, Kojo found himself increasingly on edge. He hadn't told Oma about Fi's threatening messages, and the weight of that secret grew heavier with each passing day. Kojo and Ama moved into their new home, a beautiful house Kojo had built in the affluent neighborhood of East Legon. It was a symbol of their love, success, and new life together. Every detail had been carefully thought out, from the spacious living room where they would entertain guests, to the cozy bedroom where they would build memories as a couple. But despite the luxury and comfort of their new life, Kojo couldn't shake the sense of dread that followed him like a shadow. Ama, ever attentive, noticed the subtle changes in Kojo's demeanor. At first, she chalked it up to post-wedding exhaustion. After all, planning such a large traditional ceremony had been no small feat, but as the days turned into weeks, she realized something deeper was troubling her husband. Kojo would often sit in silence for long stretches of time, staring off into the distance. He became jumpy, his phone always clutched tightly in his hand, and his once lively conversations with Oma became clipped and distant. He seemed to always be expecting something, as if waiting for the other shoe to drop. Ama decided to confront him one evening after dinner. They sat on the balcony of their home, the cool night air washing over them as they gazed out at the twinkling lights of the city below. Ama had prepared a special meal, hoping to lift Kojo's spirits, but throughout the dinner, he had been distant, barely eating. "Kojo," Ama began softly, placing her hand on his, "What's going on with you? You've been so quiet lately. I feel like you're not here with me." Kojo blinked, startled out of his thoughts. He looked at Ama, his heart heavy with guilt. He wanted to tell her everything about AFI, the messages, and his fear of what she might do. But the thought of ruining the peace they had worked so hard to build terrified him. How could he confess to Ama that, on the happiest day of their lives, his mind had been consumed with thoughts of another woman? "I'm sorry, Ama," he said, forcing a smile. "I've just been a little stressed with work. You know how it is, trying to keep everything running smoothly. I didn't mean to worry you." Ama frowned, clearly unconvinced. "Kojo, I know work can be stressful, but this feels different. You've been so distant. Is there something else? Something you're not telling me?" Her eyes searched his face, looking for answers, and for a moment, Kojo considered telling her the truth. But just as he opened his mouth to speak, his phone buzzed on the table beside them. His heart raced, and he grabbed the phone quickly, glancing at the screen. Another message from FI. "I hope you're enjoying your perfect little life with Ama. But don't forget, Kojo, I'm still here. And I always get what I want." Kojo's hands trembled as he read the message. He quickly locked his phone and set it face down on the table, but Ama had already seen the look on his face. "Who was that?" she asked, her voice tinged with suspicion. "No one," Kojo replied too quickly. "Just a work message." Ama raised an eyebrow. "At this hour?" Kojo nodded, his throat tight. "Yeah, you know how it is." Ama didn't press further, but the seed of doubt had been planted. She could feel the distance growing between them, and it scared her. She wanted to believe Kojo, but something in her gut told her that there was more to his behavior than just work stress. As the weeks passed, Kojo's paranoia grew. He couldn't escape the feeling that AFI was watching him, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Her messages became more frequent, each one more menacing than the last. She would send cryptic texts at odd hours of the night, taunting him with the idea that she could ruin everything with a single revelation. Kojo tried to block her number, but she would find a way to contact him through different means. Whether it was a message from a new number or a social media account, AFI was relentless. She had made it clear that she wasn't going to disappear quietly, and Kojo knew it was only a matter of time before she made her presence known to Ama. One evening, after another sleepless night, Kojo's phone buzzed with a message that sent a chill down his spine. "You think you can hide me from her forever? Watch your back, Kojo. I'm closer than you think." Kojo stared at the message, dread creeping up his spine. He knew AFI wasn't bluffing. She had always been a woman of action, and if she said she was going to show up, she meant it. His mind raced with possibilities. What would she do? Confront Ama? Tell her everything? The fear gnawed at him, and he couldn't take it anymore. He had to put an end to this. One night, when Ama had gone to visit her parents, Kojo made the decision to meet with AFI. He knew it was risky, but he couldn't allow her to continue holding this over him. He needed to face her, explain that his life with Ama was all that mattered to him now, and beg her to leave them in peace. He sent AFI a message. "We need to talk. Face to face. No more games." AFI's response came almost immediately. "I thought you'd never ask. Meet me at the old cafe on OSU Road. Tomorrow night. 8 p.m. Kojo's heart pounded as he read the message. The old cafe was where they used to meet when they were still together, a place filled with memories of their past. Now it felt like a place of reckoning. The next evening, Kojo told Ama that he had a business meeting and wouldn't be home until late. He hated lying to her, but he had no choice. He couldn't let her know where he was going or who he was meeting. Not yet. As he drove to the cafe, his mind raced with thoughts of how the conversation would go. He practiced what he would say, how he would explain that his life with Ama was the only thing that mattered now and that if I had to let him go. But as he pulled into the parking lot of the dimly lit cafe, his confidence wavered. AFI was already there, sitting at a table near the window. She looked stunning, as always. Her beauty hadn't faded over the years, and as Kojo approached, he couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. There had been a time when he had loved this woman, but that time had long passed. Now, all he felt was fear. He sat down across from her, his hands clasped tightly together on the table. AFI smiled, but there was something cold and calculating in her eyes. "I didn't think you'd actually show up," AFI said, her voice smooth and controlled. "I didn't have a choice," Kojo replied, his voice low. "AFI, this has to stop. I'm married now. I love Ama. What we had, it's over. You need to move on." AFI's smile faded, and her eyes hardened. "Move on? After everything we've been through? After everything I've done for you? You think you can just walk away from me and live your perfect little life with Ama?" "AFI, please," Kojo pleaded. "I never meant to hurt you. I'm sorry for how things ended, but it's been years. We've both moved on. You have to let this go." AFI leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "You don't get it, do you? You were never supposed to end things with me. We were supposed to be together. You made promises to me, Kojo. You told me you loved me." "I did," Kojo admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But things changed. I met Ama, and I fell in love with her. I didn't mean to hurt you, but I can't change what happened." AFI's eyes flashed with anger. "You think you can just forget about me? Like I'm some mistake you can erase?" "No, AFI. I'm not trying to erase you. I just want to move forward with my life. You deserve to move on too. To find someone who can give you the love and commitment I couldn't." AFI stared at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. "You think you can just walk away from me, Kojo? After everything I've done for you? I gave you my heart, my time, my money. And now you think you can just pretend like none of it happened?" Kojo's stomach churned. He knew this conversation wasn't going the way he had hoped. AFI wasn't ready to let go, and he feared that nothing he said would change her mind. "AFI, I'm begging you," Kojo said, his voice filled with desperation. "Please, don't do this. Don't ruin what I have with Ama. We've built a life together, and I love her. Please, let this go." AFI's eyes darkened as she listened to Kojo's desperate plea. The dim lights of the cafe reflected off her cold, unreadable expression. For a moment, it seemed as though she might relent, but then her lips twisted into a smile, one that sent chills down Kojo's spine. "You think you can just beg and everything will go back to normal, Kojo," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You think a few apologies will erase the years we spent together, the promises you made to me?" Kojo swallowed hard. He knew this conversation wouldn't be easy, but the raw emotion in AFI's voice made it clear that she wasn't going to let go without a fight. "AFI," Kojo started, trying to keep his voice calm, "I never wanted to hurt you. You have to understand that my feelings for Ama are real. I want to move forward with my life, and you should too." AFI shook her head, her eyes narrowing. "You think I don't know that, Kojo? I knew from the moment you started distancing yourself, before you even met Ama, that something had changed. But I was patient, waiting for you to come back to your senses. She leaned in closer, her voice lowering to a dangerous whisper. But now you want to act like we never happened. Like everything between us was just a phase. No, Kojo. I won't let you walk away that easily. Kojo felt a cold sweat break out on the back of his neck. He had underestimated Efai's attachment to him, and now he realized that there was no simple way out of this situation. Efai wasn't just angry, she was determined, obsessed even, with the idea of reclaiming what she believed was hers. What do you want from me? Kojo asked, his voice shaky. I can't undo the past, Efai. But I'm trying to be honest with you now. What do you expect me to do? Efai smiled again, but this time it wasn't the same warm smile Kojo remembered from their time together. It was twisted, vindictive. I don't want your apologies, Kojo. I want you to understand that you don't get to move on without consequences. Kojo's heart sank. He could sense the gravity of her words, the threat that lingered behind them. Efai wasn't going to let this go. She had something planned, something that would not only hurt him but also Ama. He had to stop her, but how? Efai, please, Kojo tried again, his voice almost breaking. Don't do anything rash. Whatever you're thinking, it's not worth it. Let's talk about this, find a way to make peace. Efai laughed bitterly. Peace? You think I want peace? No, Kojo, what I want is justice. I want you to feel what I've felt all these years, betrayed, abandoned, left in the dark while you parade around with your perfect little wife. The mention of Ama made Kojo's blood run cold. He realized, with horrifying clarity, that Efai's plan wasn't just to hurt him, she wanted to destroy his relationship with Ama. And the worst part? He wasn't sure how far she would go. Efai, this doesn't have to end like this, Kojo said, his voice barely a whisper. Please, don't drag Ama into this. She doesn't deserve it. This is between us. Efai's eyes gleamed with malice. Oh, but it's too late for that, Kojo. Ama is already involved. You made her part of this the moment you decided to marry her. Kojo's chest tightened as panic set in. He knew Efai well enough to understand that she wasn't bluffing. She had the means, the intelligence, and most of all, the motivation to ruin everything he held dear. But what could he do? He couldn't reason with her, and he couldn't risk pushing her further. Efai stood up abruptly, grabbing her purse and slinging it over her shoulder. You'll see soon enough, Kojo. You'll see what it feels like to lose everything. She turned on her heel and walked out of the cafe without another word, leaving Kojo sitting at the table, paralyzed with fear. His mind raced with thoughts of what she might do next. He had to find a way to stop her, but how? He couldn't go to Ama, not yet. She didn't know about Efai, and Kojo wasn't sure she would ever forgive him if she found out the truth. As Kojo sat there, the reality of his situation began to sink in. He had played a dangerous game with Efai's emotions, and now the consequences were catching up to him. He had no choice but to face the storm that was coming. The ride home was a blur for Kojo. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as his thoughts spiraled out of control. What was Efai planning? Would she confront Ama directly? Would she make their affair public? The possibilities were endless, and each one filled him with more dread than the last. When Kojo finally pulled into his driveway, he sat in the car for a few moments, trying to steady his breathing. He couldn't let Ama see him like this, she would know something was wrong immediately. But how long could he keep pretending? How long could he keep the truth from her? Ama greeted him at the door with a warm smile, her eyes lighting up as she wrapped her arms around him. How was the meeting? She asked, her voice full of genuine interest. Kojo forced a smile, kissing her on the forehead. It went fine, he lied, his stomach twisting with guilt. As they sat down for dinner, Oma chatted happily about her day, completely unaware of the storm brewing on the horizon. Kojo nodded along, offering short responses, but his mind was elsewhere. He kept replaying his conversation with AFI, trying to figure out what her next move would be. That night, as Oma slept peacefully beside him, Kojo lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He knew he had to take action. He couldn't just sit back and wait for AFI to strike. But what could he do? He couldn't tell Oma the truth, not yet. He had to protect her from the fallout, even if it meant keeping her in the dark a little longer. The next morning, Kojo made a decision. He would confront AFI one last time. He would make her understand that her vendetta would only lead to more pain for everyone involved, including herself. He had to appeal to the part of her that still cared about him, the part of her that wasn't consumed by anger and bitterness. Kojo sent AFI another message. "We need to talk. Meet me again tonight. Same place." Hours passed without a response, and Kojo's anxiety grew. What if she refused to meet? What if she had already decided to carry out her plan? But just when Kojo began to lose hope, his phone buzzed. Fine. One last time. Kojo breathed a sigh of relief, though it was short-lived. This would be his last chance to resolve things peacefully, and he knew it. He had to tread carefully. That evening, Kojo made another excuse to Oma, telling her he had to work late again. She accepted his explanation without question, though her eyes lingered on him a little longer than usual. He could tell she was starting to sense something was off, but he couldn't worry about that now. His focus was on AFI. When he arrived at the cafe, AFI was already there, sitting at the same table by the window. This time, there was no smile on her face, no hint of warmth. She looked cold, calculating, and Kojo knew this meeting would be even more difficult than the last. He sat down across from her, his heart pounding in his chest. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, his voice strained. AFI didn't respond immediately. She stared at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke. "This is the last time, Kojo. After tonight, you won't see me again. But know this, whatever happens next is on you." Kojo swallowed hard. "AFI, please. I'm begging you, don't do this. You'll only end up hurting yourself in the process. You don't have to carry this anger with you. We can find a way to move on from this, both of us." AFI laughed bitterly. "Move on? After everything you've done to me? After everything you promised me? You don't get to walk away clean, Kojo. Not this time." Kojo leaned forward, his voice urgent. "I made mistakes, AFI. I know that. But ruining my life, ruining Oma's life, it won't make things better. It won't give you what you're looking for." AFI's eyes narrowed. "And what is it that you think I'm looking for, Kojo? Forgiveness? Closure? No. I want justice. I want you to feel what I felt." Kojo's chest tightened. He could see the hatred in her eyes, the pain that had twisted her heart. There was no reasoning with her anymore. She was beyond words, beyond logic. "AFI, please," Kojo whispered, his voice breaking. "Don't do this. Don't destroy everything." AFI stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. She looked down at him, her face hard and unyielding. "You'll see soon enough, Kojo." Kojo sat frozen in his seat as AFI walked out of the cafe, her footsteps echoing in his mind long after she disappeared. His heart pounded with fear, a suffocating dread that clung to him like a heavy fog. He could feel the weight of her threat hanging over his head. Whatever she had planned, it was imminent. He stayed seated for a few more minutes, trying to collect his thoughts, but his mind was racing. What could she possibly do? Was she going to confront Ama? Expose their affair? Or worse, harm her in some way? He had to act fast. His phone buzzed in his pocket, but he ignored it, lost in a whirlwind of panic and confusion. Forcing himself to stand, Kojo headed for the door. He needed to think, to find a way to stop a fight before it was too late. When he stepped outside, the cool night air hit his face, offering a brief respite from the storm raging inside him. But it didn't last. His phone buzzed again, pulling him back to reality. He finally glanced at the screen. It was a message from Ama. "Are you okay? You've been acting strange lately. We need to talk." Kojo's heart sank. He had been so caught up in his mess with a fight that he hadn't realized how much it was affecting his relationship with Ama. She was beginning to notice the cracks, and the last thing he wanted was to raise her suspicions. "Not yet." He quickly typed a response. "I'm fine, Ama. We'll talk when I get home. Just a lot on my mind with work." It wasn't the best excuse, but it was all he could manage in the moment. Shoving the phone back into his pocket, Kojo headed to his car. He needed time to think, to figure out how to handle F5 before her next move. That night, when Kojo returned home, he found Ama waiting for him in the living room. She was sitting on the couch, her eyes filled with concern. Kojo felt a wave of guilt wash over him. Ama had always been there for him, supporting him through everything, and now he was lying to her, hiding the truth that could shatter their marriage. He forced a smile, trying to act normal. "Hey, sorry I'm late. Work was intense." Ama didn't return the smile. Instead, she stood up and walked over to him, her eyes searching his face. "Kojo, what's going on? You've been distant for weeks now. I know something's bothering you, and I need to know what it is." Kojo's stomach twisted into knots. He wasn't ready for this conversation, but he could see that Ama wasn't going to let it go. He had no choice but to give her something, anything to ease her concerns. "It's nothing major, Ama. Just stress from work, and I've been feeling a little overwhelmed lately. But I promise, it's nothing you need to worry about." Ama frowned, clearly not satisfied with his answer. "Kojo, I know you better than that. This isn't just about work. There's something else, isn't there?" Kojo opened his mouth to respond, but before he could say anything, his phone rang. The sound pierced the tension in the room like a knife, and Kojo's heart skipped a beat when he saw Efai's name flash across the screen. His hand shook as he quickly declined the call, praying that Ama hadn't noticed. But of course, she had. "Who was that?" Ama asked, her voice quiet but laced with suspicion. Kojo felt trapped, like a cornered animal. His mind scrambled for a lie, something that would explain the call without raising any more questions. But Ama's eyes were fixed on him, and he knew that one wrong word could unravel everything. "It was no one," he said, his voice too quick, too defensive. Ama's expression hardened. "No one? Then why did you look so panicked when they called?" Kojo cursed silently. He had to regain control of the situation before it spiraled out of hand. Taking a deep breath, he forced himself to meet Ama's gaze. "Ama, I don't want you to worry about this. It's a work-related issue, and I'm handling it. Please, trust me." Ama's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Kojo thought she might push further. But then she sighed, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "I do trust you, Kojo. But lately, it feels like you're shutting me out. If something's wrong, I want to help." Kojo swallowed hard, guilt gnawing at him. He didn't deserve her trust, not after everything he had done behind her back. But for now, he had no choice but to cling to the lie. "I'm sorry, Ama," he said softly, reaching for her hand. I didn't mean to shut you out. I've just been trying to deal with some things on my own. But I promise, I'll be better. We'll talk more. Ama nodded, though there was still a lingering doubt in her eyes. She leaned into his embrace, resting her head against his chest. Kojo held her close, but his mind was miles away. AFI's call had shaken him to the core. What was she planning? And why now? The next morning, Kojo woke to a flurry of text and missed calls from AFI. Each message more ominous than the last. I hope you're ready, Kojo. Things are about to get interesting. Did you think I would just disappear quietly? You'll regret underestimating me. His heart raced as he read the messages. AFI wasn't bluffing. She was gearing up for something big, and Kojo had no idea how to stop her. As he got ready for work, Kojo's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a voicemail from AFI. With trembling hands, he pressed play. Her voice came through the speaker, cold and venomous. You didn't think I'd let you off that easily, did you? I warned you, Kojo. You made your bed, and now you're going to lie in it. I'll be seeing you, and Ama, very soon. Kojo's blood ran cold. He had no idea what AFI had planned, but one thing was clear, she was coming for Ama. The woman he loved was now caught in the crossfire of a storm he had created. The following days were a blur of tension and fear. Kojo tried to act normal around Ama, but the weight of AFI's threat loomed over him like a dark cloud. He was constantly on edge, checking his phone every few minutes, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Ama, meanwhile, had grown more distant. She could sense that something was wrong, but Kojo's evasiveness had only made things worse. Their once happy marriage now felt like it was teetering on the edge of collapse. One evening, as Kojo sat in the living room, trying to focus on a work email, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from an unknown number. You're invited to a party. Don't miss it. Attached was a photo of Ama, standing outside their house, completely unaware that someone had been watching her. Kojo's heart nearly stopped. AFI was getting closer, and now she was making her presence known in the most terrifying way possible. He bolted from his chair, rushing to the front door, but when he stepped outside, there was no one there. The street was quiet, empty, as if nothing had happened. But Kojo knew better. AFI was watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He ran back inside, locking the door behind him. Panic gripped him as he paced the room, trying to figure out what to do next. He couldn't tell Ama, not yet. She would demand answers, and the truth would destroy her. But he couldn't just sit idly by while AFI stalked them. Desperation clawed at Kojo's mind. He needed to stop AFI before she took things any further. But how? How could he reason with someone who was so consumed by vengeance? The answer came to him in a flash of clarity. He couldn't reason with AFI, he had to outmaneuver her. If she wanted to play dirty, he would have to play smarter. Kojo picked up his phone, dialing a number he hadn't called in years. It rang a few times before a familiar voice answered on the other end. Kojo. Long time no see. What can I do for you? I need a favor, Kojo said, his voice steady. And it's urgent. Kojo's heart pounded as he ended the call, his mind racing through a dozen possibilities. He couldn't afford to make any more mistakes. His past with AFI had already led him down a dangerous path, and now, his present was spiraling out of control. As he put down the phone, his gaze shifted to the front door. There was an eerie silence in the house, and the weight of impending disaster was heavy in the air. The person on the other end of the line was Kwame, an old friend from university who had once worked in law enforcement before branching out into private security. Kwame was known for getting things done discreetly, no matter how complex or delicate the situation. Kojo had called him because he knew that Kwame could help him protect Ama without raising suspicions or exposing his dirty laundry. Kojo paced the floor as he waited for Kwame's arrival. His thoughts were a tangled web of guilt, fear, and regret. He should have come clean to Ama the moment AFI reappeared, but his pride and the fear of losing her had stopped him. Now, it seemed like everything was unraveling, and he wasn't sure if he could keep it all together much longer. An hour later, there was a knock on the door. Kojo opened it to find Kwame standing there, looking sharp and calm as always, dressed in a crisp black suit that gave him the air of someone who was always in control. Kojo, Kwame greeted with a firm handshake, his eyes scanning the surroundings as he stepped into the house. "It's been a while. I take it from your call this isn't a social visit." Kojo nodded, closing the door behind him. "Thanks for coming, Kwame. I'm in deep trouble, and I don't know how to get out of it." Kwame's expression remained unreadable as he sat down on the couch, motioning for Kojo to do the same. "Tell me what's going on." For the next half hour, Kojo laid everything out, the affair with AFI, the wedding disaster that never came to pass, and now, the constant barrage of threats that AFI was hurling at him. He didn't leave anything out. Kwame listened intently, his face betraying no emotion as Kojo poured out the full scope of his mistake. When Kojo was done, there was a long pause before Kwame finally spoke. "You're in a tight spot, my friend," Kwame said, leaning back in his seat. "This woman, AFI, she's dangerous, not just because of what she knows, but because she feels betrayed. People like her, they don't act rationally when their emotions are involved." Kojo nodded, his throat dry. "I know. That's why I need your help. I can't let her destroy my life, or Ama's. But I don't know what to do." Kwame folded his arms, his mind already working through possible solutions. "You've got two problems here. First, you need to make sure AFI doesn't harm Ama or expose your affair. Second, you need to get rid of this threat without leaving a trail of suspicion. This woman clearly has nothing to lose, which makes her unpredictable." Kojo's pulse quickened. "What do you suggest?" Kwame tapped his fingers on the armrest of the couch as he spoke. "We need to gather information on her, find out what her weaknesses are, what leverage we can use. If she's coming after you, she must have a reason beyond just revenge. My guess is that she wants something more." Kojo frowned. "What do you mean?" "She already ruined the wedding, and now she's threatening Ama. What more could she want?" Kwame gave a small, knowing smile. "Women like AFI don't stop at just destruction. They want control. She might be after money, status, or even a twisted form of justice. But if we can figure out what her ultimate goal is, we can turn the tables on her." Kojo thought about this for a moment, his mind racing with possibilities. Could Kwame be right? Could AFI's obsession with him be about more than just heartbreak? Kwame stood up, adjusting his jacket. "I'll look into it. In the meantime, you need to keep things as normal as possible with Ama. Don't let her suspect anything. If AFI makes another move, I'll be ready to counter it." Kojo let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. For the first time in days, he felt like he wasn't completely powerless. "Thanks, Kwame. I don't know what I'd do without you." Kwame gave a small nod, his expression still serious. "Don't thank me yet. This isn't over." The following days passed in a tense blur. Kojo did his best to act normal around Ama, but the constant fear of AFI's next move made every interaction feel strained. He tried to reassure Ama with small gestures, bringing her flowers, cooking her favorite meals, but she could sense something was still off. Her patience was wearing thin, and Kojo knew it was only a matter of time before she started asking more pointed questions. Meanwhile, Kwame had begun digging into AFI's background, trying to uncover anything that might give them an edge. It didn't take long for him to find out that AFI had a troubled past, strained relationships with her family, financial problems, and a string of failed relationships before Kojo. It seemed that Kojo had been the only steady presence in her life, and his betrayal had hit her harder than he realized. But there was something else Kwame uncovered. AFI had been receiving large sums of money from an unknown source over the past few months. It didn't take long for Kwame to trace the payments back to a man named Charles Owusu, a wealthy businessman with ties to several shady dealings in Kumasi. AFI's connection to him was unclear, but Kwame suspected that Charles was backing her in some way. When Kwame brought this information to Kojo, his blood ran cold. What does this mean? Is she working for him? It's possible, Kwame said, his tone grave. Or she might be using him to get what she wants. Either way, this complicates things. If Charles is involved, you're dealing with more than just a scorn lover. He's got the resources to make your life hell if he wants to. Kojo's stomach twisted in knots. So what do we do now? Kwame's eyes darkened. We need to send a message. AFI and Charles need to know that they are not the only ones who can play dirty. Later that night, as Kojo lay in bed beside Ama, he couldn't sleep. His mind was buzzing with everything Kwame had told him. The idea of being caught in a game with someone as dangerous as Charles Owusu made his skin crawl. He glanced over at Ama, who was sound asleep, blissfully unaware of the storm that was brewing around them. Kojo's phone buzzed on the nightstand, and he grabbed it quickly, worried it might wake Ama. It was a message from Kwame. We are moving forward. Keep your phone on. Things are about to get messy. Kojo's heart raced. He didn't know what Kwame had planned, but he trusted him. He had to. There was no turning back now. The next day, Kojo went through the motions of his usual routine, but there was a nervous energy coursing through him. He kept checking his phone, waiting for an update from Kwame. It wasn't until late afternoon that his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a photo. When Kojo opened it, his blood ran cold. It was a picture of Charles Owusu, unconscious and bound to a chair, a bruise already forming on the side of his face. The caption underneath read, "Time to talk." Kojo stared at the image in shock, his heart pounding in his chest. What had Kwame done? This was more than he had bargained for. But there was no turning back now. Kwame had taken matters into his own hands, and Kojo was in too deep to stop it. The following hours passed in a haze. Kojo tried to act normal around Ama, but his mind was racing with thoughts of Kwame's plan. He couldn't shake the image of Charles bound to that chair, and the realization that things had escalated far beyond what he'd anticipated weighed heavily on him. Just after midnight, Kojo's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a voice message from Kwame. Kojo hesitated before pressing play. Kwame's voice came through, combat with an edge of danger. We had a conversation with Charles. He won't be a problem anymore. As for AFI, she's been warned. She knows what's at stake if she continues down this path. But you need to be careful, Kojo. This is far from over. Kojo swallowed hard, his pulse racing. He had wanted to protect Ama, to find a way out of this mess without dragging her into it. But now, the stakes were higher than ever. And as much as he trusted Kwame, he couldn't shake the feeling that they had crossed a line. Ama stood beside him, her hand reaching out to touch his arm. Kojo, she murmured sleepily. Everything okay? Kojo quickly put his phone down, forcing a smile. Yeah, everything's fine. Go back to sleep. But as Ama drifted off again, Kojo lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Everything was far from fine. Chapters from over. The tension that had built over the past few days was unbearable, and the situation had spiraled into something darker and more dangerous than he had ever anticipated. AFI's reappearance had set off a chain of events that he could no longer control, and now, with Charles Owusu in the mix, things were even more unpredictable. The next morning, Kojo woke up early, careful not to disturb Ama, who still lay peacefully asleep beside him. He tiptoed out of the bedroom and into the kitchen, his mind racing. What had he gotten himself into? Could he ever go back to a normal life with Ama, or was the damage already done? As he brewed a cup of coffee, his phone buzzed with another message from Kwame. Meet me at our spot. We need to talk. Kojo's heart sank. Their spot was a secluded bar in the outskirts of Accra, a place where they had gone during their university days whenever they needed to discuss something serious. Kojo hadn't been there in years, but now it seemed like the only place where he could meet Kwame without raising suspicion. After scribbling a quick note for Oma saying he had some work to attend to, Kojo slipped out of the house and drove to the bar. The drive felt like a blur, his mind preoccupied with thoughts of AFI, Charles, and the mess that had unfolded in such a short time. When he arrived, Kwame was already sitting at a corner table, a bottle of beer in front of him. His demeanor was calm, but there was a seriousness in his eyes that immediately set Kojo on edge. Kwame, Kojo greeted as he slid into the chair opposite his friend. What's going on? That picture you sent last night, what the hell are you doing? Kwame leaned back, taking a sip of his beer before responding. Relax, Kojo. Everything's under control. Under control. Kojo's voice rose slightly. You kidnapped Charles Owusu. You can't just do things like that without consequences. Kwame's gaze hardened. I didn't kidnap him. We had a conversation. Charles was the one funding AFI's little game, and I made sure he understood that continuing down that path would cost him dearly. Kojo ran a hand through his hair, frustration bubbling up inside him. And what about AFI? What did you do to her? Kwame shrugged. She's been warned. She knows if she keeps pushing, things will get ugly. But I don't think she's going to let go that easily. Kojo's stomach churned. He had wanted to stop AFI from ruining his life, but now it seemed like he had set off a war. So, what do we do now? What's the next move? Kwame's eyes narrowed. We wait. I've got people watching both AFI and Charles. If they make a move, we'll know about it. Kojo shook his head. I don't want to play this game anymore, Kwame. I just want my life back. I want to fix things with Oma, move on from this mess. Kwame leaned forward, his voice low and firm. You don't get it, do you? This isn't just about you anymore. AFI's not going to stop until she gets what she wants. And Charles, well, let's just say he's not the kind of man who takes threats lightly. You're in too deep now, Kojo. The only way out is to see this through. Kojo stared at his friend, feeling the weight of those words. He had never wanted things to escalate this far. He had just wanted to protect his relationship with Oma, but now it felt like he was being dragged into something much darker. Kojo, listen to me, Kwame continued, his tone softening slightly. I know you didn't want this, but you have to trust me. We are going to get through this. Just keep your head down, stay close to Oma, and let me handle the rest. Kojo sighed, knowing he had little choice but to trust Kwame. He couldn't see a way out of this on his own. Okay, he finally said. But promise me that no one else is going to get hurt. Kwame raised an eyebrow, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. I'll do my best, Kojo. But you should know by now, sometimes, people get hurt no matter how careful we are. Meanwhile, across town, AFI sat in her dimly lit apartment, nursing a glass of wine and staring out the window. The events of the past few days had left her in a state of emotional turmoil. She had tried to ruin Kojo's wedding, but now, she was starting to feel like she was the one losing control. When she had first gotten involved with Charles Owusu, it had seemed like a mutually beneficial arrangement. Charles had connections, money, and the kind of power that could help her get back at Kojo. But now, things were spiraling out of control. Charles had disappeared after their last meeting, and she hadn't heard from him in days. AFI took a long sip of her wine, trying to calm the anxiety that gnawed at her insides. She had made a mistake by trusting Charles. She had thought he could help her, but now it seemed like he was using her for his own agenda. And worse, Kojo had somehow managed to strike back. She wasn't sure how, but she knew that something had shifted. Kojo froze when he saw her. The look on her face told him everything he needed to know. She had found the receipt. Ama, he began, but she cut him off. Who is she, Kojo? Ama's voice was calm, but there was a dangerous edge to it. Who did you buy this for? Kojo's mind raced. He hadn't planned for this. He had been so focused on AFI that he had completely forgotten about the receipt. Now, it was all unraveling. It's not what you think, Kojo said, his voice pleading. I bought it for you, Ama. I swear. Ama's eyes narrowed. Don't lie to me, Kojo. You bought this necklace before the wedding, and I never got it. So, who was it for? Kojo swallowed hard, his heart pounding in his chest. He had two choices: he could tell her the truth, or he could keep lying. But the truth was too dangerous. If Ama knew everything, it would destroy her. I bought it for my mother, Kojo lied, his voice barely steady. I was going to give it to her as a wedding gift, but things got so hectic that I forgot. Ama stared at him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, Kojo thought she might believe him. But then, she shook her head. I don't believe you, she said quietly. I've been patient, Kojo. I've trusted you. But something is going on, and I need to know what it is. Kojo felt the walls closing in around him. He couldn't keep this up. The lies were piling up, and soon, they would come crashing down. But he wasn't ready to tell Ama the whole truth, not yet. Ama, please, he begged. You have to trust me. I'm handling something right now, something complicated. But I promise you, it's going to be okay. Ama's eyes filled with tears. Trust you? How can I trust you when you're hiding things from me? Kojo reached for her, but she pulled away, her voice trembling with emotion. I can't do this anymore, Kojo. I can't keep pretending everything is fine when I know it's not. Kojo's heart shattered as he watched Ama walk away, leaving him alone in the living room. The weight of his lies pressed down on him, suffocating him. He had wanted to protect Ama from the truth, but now it seemed like he was only pushing her further away. Meanwhile, AFI was preparing for her next move. The man who had visited her had made it clear that there was no turning back. If she wanted to win this fight, she had to be ruthless. And that meant taking Kojo down, once and for all. She had made her choice, and now she would see it through to the bitter end. Ama's heartache grew heavier with each passing day. The space between her and Kojo seemed to widen, filled with unspoken words and unanswered questions. Their home, once a sanctuary of love and trust, now felt like a battlefield scarred by deceit. Despite Kojo's pleas for patience and understanding, Ama couldn't shake the feeling that there was more he wasn't telling her. Determined to find answers, Ama decided to reach out to an old friend from her university days, ESI, who had become a private investigator. ESI had a reputation for solving even the most complex of cases, and Ama hoped that her expertise could shed light on the mystery surrounding Kojo. Ama's decision wasn't easy. It felt like a betrayal of the trust she wanted to preserve in her marriage, but she needed clarity. With a heavy heart, she made the call. ESI arrived at Ama's apartment late one evening. She was a tall, confident woman with a sharp intellect that was evident in her eyes. Over a cup of tea, Ama explained the situation, including Kojo's suspicious behavior, the mysterious necklace receipt, and her growing sense of betrayal. ESI listened intently, her expression thoughtful. I need to start by observing Kojo's routines and interactions. Sometimes, the answers lie in the smallest details. As ESI began her investigation, Ama felt a mixture of hope and dread. She trusted ESI's skills, but she was anxious about what might be uncovered. She couldn't help but replay every moment of her relationship with Kojo, searching for signs she might have missed. Meanwhile, Kojo was at his breaking point. His safe house was a constant reminder of his fears and the mess he had created. Kwame's updates were grim, AFI's associates were getting closer, and Kojo's options were dwindling. He needed a plan to end this nightmare and salvage what was left of his life. Desperate for answers, Kojo reached out to Kwame. "We need to find AFI and end this once and for all. I can't keep living in hiding." Kwame agreed. "We'll use everything at our disposal. But remember, AFI is dangerous. She's not just a scorned lover, she's calculated and ruthless. We need to be careful." Kojo's thoughts turned to his marriage. He knew that revealing the truth would likely destroy any chance of reconciliation with Ama, but he was cornered. The weight of his actions and their consequences was beginning to feel unbearable. As Kwame arranged for a team to track down AFI, Kojo spent his days trying to make sense of his situation. He started reflecting on the choices that led him to this point, his affair, his lies, and the tangled web of deceit that had ensnared him. It was a painful journey, but it was clear that he needed to confront the reality of his actions. Ama's resolve was unshakable. ESI's investigation revealed some startling facts. Through discreet surveillance, ESI discovered that Kojo had been meeting with someone frequently, someone who wasn't just a colleague or friend. She also found evidence suggesting that Kojo's financial dealings were more complex than initially thought, raising questions about his true intentions. One evening, as Ama was preparing dinner, ESI called with new information. "Ama, I found something significant. Kojo has been involved in illegal activities, money laundering, to be precise. His financial records suggest that he's been using his business as a front for these operations." Ama's heart sank. The news was more devastating than she had anticipated. How could he do this? How could he hide such a serious crime? ESI's voice was calm but firm. "This is more than just a betrayal of trust. It's a criminal issue. You need to be prepared for what comes next. I keep digging, but you should know that this could get dangerous." Ama felt overwhelmed but knew she couldn't turn back now. She needed to confront Kojo with the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Kojo's confrontation with AFI was imminent. Kwame had located AFI's hideout, a secluded house on the outskirts of the city. With a team of operatives, Kojo prepared for the meeting, hoping that this confrontation would end the terror AFI had inflicted on his life. As Kojo and Kwame approached the house, Kojo's nerves were frayed. This was the moment of truth, either AFI would relent, or things would escalate further. They entered the house cautiously, their senses on high alert. AFI was waiting for them. Her face was a mask of cold determination as she faced Kojo. "You came, just as I expected." Kojo took a deep breath. "AFI, this has to end. I can't keep living in fear. I want to make a deal, whatever you want, just let me live my life in peace." AFI's eyes were cold. "You think you can just buy your way out of this? You're in deeper than you realize, Kojo. This is bigger than just you and me." Kwame stepped forward. "AFI, you're making a mistake. You're putting yourself at risk, and you're risking the safety of others. Let's find a way to resolve this without further violence." The standoff was tense. AFI was unwavering, her bitterness fueling her resolve. But as the minutes ticked by, the weight of the situation began to sink in. The threats and the confrontation were taking a toll on her. Kojo's words reached AFI in a way he hadn't expected. I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt you or anyone else. But I'm tired of living like this. I just want to make things right. AFI's expression softened slightly, but she remained guarded. You've already done enough damage, Kojo. It's too late for redemption now. Back at Oma's apartment, she was dealing with the fallout of ESI's findings. The revelation about Kojo's involvement in criminal activities was a devastating blow. Ama felt betrayed not only by Kojo's personal deceit but also by the realization that his actions had legal and financial repercussions. Ama's mind was racing as she tried to process everything. She needed to make a decision, whether to confront Kojo with the evidence ESI had gathered or to cut her losses and move on. The path ahead was unclear, and the pain of betrayal was raw. ESI, sensing Ama's distress, offered her support. You don't have to go through this alone, Ama. We'll work together to figure out the best course of action. Ama nodded, feeling a mix of gratitude and sorrow. She knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but she was determined to find closure. The unraveling of her marriage and Kojo's deceit was only part of a larger, more complex puzzle. As she prepared for the next steps, she resolved to face whatever came her way with courage and clarity. Kojo's meeting with AFI ended in uncertainty. While the confrontation hadn't resolved anything, it had forced both parties to confront the reality of their situation. AFI's bitterness and Kojo's desperation created a volatile mix, but neither side was ready to back down completely. As Kojo and Kwame left AFI's hideout, Kojo felt a glimmer of hope that he could find a way out of this mess. The future was uncertain, but he knew he had to face the consequences of his actions and find a path to redemption. The conversation left both of them emotionally drained. They parted ways, knowing that their relationship had reached a breaking point. The damage was irreparable, and their future together seemed impossible. The days following the confrontation were filled with legal and personal battles for Ama and Kojo. Ama worked closely with her lawyer to safeguard her interests and distance herself from Kojo's criminal activities. She was determined to rebuild her life and find a path forward, even if it meant leaving behind everything she once knew. Kojo, on the other hand, faced mounting pressure from the crime syndicates. His attempts to negotiate with them were met with hostility, and the danger grew more immediate. With Kwame's help, he began planning an escape route, but the situation remained precarious. The impact of the situation rippled through their lives. Ama's friends and family offered their support, helping her navigate the legal challenges and emotional fallout. Kojo's world, once filled with success and stability, had become a labyrinth of threats and deceit. As Ama and Kojo faced their separate battles, they were each confronted with the harsh reality of their choices. Their love had been tested beyond measure, and the consequences of their actions were unfolding in ways they hadn't anticipated. The story of their tumultuous relationship and the dramatic events that followed would forever be etched in their memories. The journey ahead was uncertain, but both Ama and Kojo were determined to find a way to move forward, despite the shadows of their past. As the weeks turned into months, Ama and Kojo faced the aftermath of their turbulent experiences with resilience and determination. The events had left deep scars, but they had also imparted invaluable lessons. Ama, now resolutely focused on her future, threw herself into rebuilding her life. She started a community outreach program aimed at helping young women navigate financial independence and avoid the pitfalls she had faced. Her experiences had given her a unique perspective, and she used that to empower others. Her new path wasn't without challenges. Ama faced scrutiny and judgment from some who still viewed her as a victim of her circumstances. However, her unwavering commitment to helping others and her own journey of healing earned her respect and admiration from those who saw her as a beacon of strength. Kojo's situation, though fraught with difficulty, began to stabilize. With Kwame's assistance, he managed to extricate himself from the grip of the crime syndicates. It wasn't an easy process, and Kojo had to confront the consequences of his actions, including legal repercussions and the loss of trust from those he had wronged. Kojo worked diligently to make amends. He began by cooperating with law enforcement, providing information that helped dismantle some of the criminal networks he had been involved with. He also used his business acumen to create a fund for victims of financial crimes, aiming to contribute positively to society and make restitution for his past wrongs. The journey to redemption was long and arduous for both Ama and Kojo. Their paths diverged, but the lessons they learned along the way helped them grow and evolve. They each found new purposes in their lives, driven by a desire to make a positive impact despite their past mistakes. The importance of transparency and honesty. One of the most profound lessons from Ama and Kojo's story is the value of honesty in relationships. Kojo's deceit not only jeopardized his marriage but also led to criminal entanglements that affected many lives. Transparency is crucial for building and maintaining trust, whether in personal relationships or professional dealings. The consequences of betrayal. Betrayal can have far-reaching consequences. Kojo's actions not only harmed his relationship with Ama but also involved her in dangerous situations. The story underscores how betrayal can fracture relationships and create ripple effects that extend beyond the immediate situation. The consequences of betrayal. Betrayal can have far-reaching consequences. Kojo's actions not only harmed his relationship with Ama but also involved her in dangerous situations. The story underscores how betrayal can fracture relationships and create ripple effects that extend beyond the immediate situation. The consequences of betrayal. Betrayal can have far-reaching consequences. Kojo's actions not only harmed his relationship with Ama but also involved her in dangerous situations. The story underscores how betrayal can fracture relationships and create ripple effects that extend beyond the immediate situation. The consequences of betrayal. Betrayal can have far-reaching consequences. Kojo's actions not only harmed his relationship with Ama but also involved her in dangerous situations. The story underscores how betrayal can fracture relationships and create ripple effects that extend beyond the immediate situation. The consequences of betrayal. Betrayal can have far-reaching consequences. Kojo's actions not only harmed his relationship with Ama but also involved her in dangerous situations. The story underscores how betrayal can fracture relationships and create ripple effects that extend beyond the immediate situation. The consequences of betrayal. Betrayal can have far-reaching consequences. Kojo's actions not only harmed his relationship with Ama but also involved her in dangerous situations. The story underscores how betrayal can fracture relationships and create ripple effects that extend beyond the immediate situation. The complexity of human relationships. The story reflects the complexity of human relationships and the many layers of emotions and motivations involved. Understanding that people can have both strengths and flaws, and that relationships require ongoing effort and communication, is key to navigating and resolving conflicts. 11. In the end, Ama and Kojo's story serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of integrity, the impact of actions on others, and the journey toward healing and redemption. Their experiences offer valuable lessons for anyone grappling with betrayal, seeking redemption, or striving to build a better future despite past mistakes.